Stop using minimal APIs for your large projects. Why? Because Reddit said so. Question: how do you structure large minimal API projects? I use controllers. Why? Few things are missing, but a big one is organization, lol. Don't use minimal APIs if your API isn't minimal. Any attempt to organize minimal APIs end up looking like badly written controllers, so why not use controllers from the start? By not doing them at all. Minimal APIs are for single page examples, teaching, and serverless functions. They aren't for large APIs. I'm going to show you today a project using controllers and how we can refactor it using minimal APIs so it's structured exactly like controllers, but you have better performance and less code. Okay, so here's our project. It's just a basic project with a user controller, and we just have like a get all users, get a user by ID, create a user, update a user, delete a user. You know, just a basic controller with create, read, update, delete sort of stuff. So let's run this and see what it looks like. We have our endpoints here. We have some documentation with it in terms of request and response bodies and so on. That's what we're going to be replicating using minimal APIs. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is create a folder called minimal API. Next, what I'm going to do is create a class inside of this minimal API called user endpoints. And we're also going to make our user endpoints a static class. Next, what we're going to do is take all of our controller methods and we're going to paste them inside of our user endpoints. So as you can see, it's complaining we don't have a reference to this user service. Since this is a static class, we can't inject dependencies. We actually need to inject the dependencies into the actual method itself. So we're just going to inject the iUser service into each of these methods. The next thing that it's complaining about is we can't actually declare instance methods inside of a static class. So let's change these methods to static. We don't actually need any of these comments or these annotations anymore. So let's just delete all them. So as you can see, it's now complaining about our return types. We don't actually have these methods since we're not inheriting from that controller base. So what we can use instead is typed results. Using type results is really handy because it's actually going to automatically document our endpoints for us. It's going to give us what is going to be returned, what status codes, and then also what bodies are actually going to be returned as well. So rather than using iActionResult, we can actually use this results class, and then we can go okay of type user, and then we're also going to say not found. So we can do that for the rest of our methods. So we've changed all of our methods using type results rather than iActionResult. The next step is actually creating an extension method to actually register these endpoints so we can actually use them. And this extension method is going to be called map user endpoints. And we're going to take in an I endpoint route builder. So the next step is actually going to be mapping an endpoint group. So what I'm going to do is go var endpoints equals app.mapGroup. And we're going to call this /minimal/users. So now that we've created a group for all these user endpoints, let's actually map the endpoints to the group. So I'm just going to go endpoints.mapGet, and it's going to be our base route, and it's going to take in our getAll method. And now we can just map the rest of the endpoints. So we can get by ID, we can create a user, we can update a user, and we can delete a user. Now, the final thing that we actually need to do is register these endpoints so we can actually use them. So let's go to our program.cs, and we're actually going to call that extension method, app.mapUserEndpoints. Now let's run this application and see what we get. So as you can see, we have our minimal endpoints and then we have our controller endpoints as well. One difference so far is that we don't have our documentation just yet. But if we actually expand one of these endpoints, you'll see that we're still getting our response bodies and it's describing the shape of our data using that results object. So in order to add the OpenAPI documentation, we need to install a package. So let's open up our NuGet package manager and let's search for OpenAPI. And what we're going to be installing is Microsoft.ASP.NET Core OpenAPI. Now let's go to our user endpoints, and inside of our group here, what I'm going to be saying is with OpenAPI. And now I can actually add all of my descriptions to these endpoints. So with summary, gets all users, and let's just do all the rest for the remainder of our endpoints. So we've documented all of our endpoints. So if we run this now, we should see that we get a summary. What can we do? You can see we are now getting the documentation for our endpoints. A common thing using controllers is being able to specify attributes or filters or anything like that that is going to impact all of the endpoints for that particular controller. I'll be able to do the same thing using minimal APIs. And the answer is yes. So using this endpoint group, we can actually affect all of these endpoints. Let's say we wanted to make them authorized, require authorization. We have all of these methods to actually impact these endpoints. Let's say I wanted to add a filter. I can just go add endpoint filter and then specify my endpoint filter that is going to run on every single one of these endpoints inside of the group. You can also update individual endpoints rather than just a group. So let's say on our endpoint group here, I'm saying requires authorization, but I want our get all users to actually be anonymous. Well, it's really simple. I can just override it just by saying allow anonymous inside of our endpoint mapping here. So let's actually compare this to controllers. In our user endpoints class, you'll see it's about 58 lines of code. If we compare that to our controllers is like 70 lines of code. We're actually writing less code for the exact same functionality. Now let's talk about performance using minimal APIs versus controllers. So I ran a test using K6 and I ran the test 3 times just to avoid any cold start problems. So what we can see here is we have controllers on the left, minimal API on the right. So one important thing to note is our HTTP requests per second. You can see our controllers hit around 9,000 requests per second. And that's pretty good, right? That's pretty fast, 9,000 requests per second, where our minimal APIs hit around 10,000 requests per second. So as you can see, minimal APIs are faster, all while writing less code. Now, would I refactor a really large project using controllers just for an extra 1,000 requests per second? Probably not. But if I'm starting a brand new project, I'm gonna be going with minimal APIs. Despite what Reddit thinks, you actually can structure your minimal API projects very much like controllers, get the organizational benefit with less code and better performance. So remember, don't trust everything you see on the internet. Go and do your own research and try and answer the questions to your own problems by just trying things out. Hope you guys have enjoyed the video. See you in the next one.